Hello and good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. Today, I've got a live stream for you on Datastax's Astra database. This is a product that is hosted in the cloud that I've written a blog post about. I'm going to show you how to integrate it with OpenFaaS using Node.js. And to help me with that today and to be my co-host, I'm going to invite on Stefano Lottini. Stefano is a developer advocate at Datastax. Hi, Stefano.
Hi, Alex. Thank you for having me here.
Where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining from Italy. I live in northern Italy at the foot of the Alps. Yeah.
Great. Is it sunny? Is the weather turning already?
It's going to get dark, but it's been awful weather today, so not so sunny. But
yeah, we've had a bit of that in England as well, with the rain and the cold, and then we just had an hour or two of sunshine just now.
Yeah, actually, summer ended right yesterday, abruptly. So yeah.
Well, it's great to have you here because I know that you know Astra really well, but over the last probably 2 or 3 weeks, you've also been getting to know OpenFaaS. How has that been going for you?
Yeah, well, my attention was drawn to OpenFaaS recently because of its interaction with Astra DB, and I have to say it's a very well thought and nice product. I mean, it's not always the case that you want to fire up a whole Kubernetes cluster and managing it by yourself and with all of its complications. Sometimes you have a smaller scale project, or you just can't spare a whole ops team. And OpenFaaS, I think it solves very well solves a problem that is there. And by the way, it's very easy to set it up, in my opinion. It took me a breeze to have it up and running on my machine. And I'm not an expert on Kubernetes particularly, so it speaks a lot.
Here, I know you just mentioned about having a whole Kubernetes cluster. A couple of things might be interesting for you or people that are tuning in that may not know yet. Is there's an ebook all about OpenFaaS based about Node.js examples. So talking about Postgres, Redis, MongoDB, and now we have a new blog post all about Astra DB and Cassandra. And so we kind of covered the whole works there, whatever it is you're using. And this particular ebook gears around FASD. FASD is probably something you haven't touched just yet, but that installs itself on a single virtual machine. And is much easier and simpler to maintain. It uses effectively containers directly, has some basic networking in it. And so what I did last year, I think it was last year, is wrote up this book, and it's got everything you could want to know about CI/CD, background jobs, and as I said, working with databases. So that might be something that's interesting for people. And I thought what we could do is perhaps we'll get on to this week's news, because we've got a few bits from the community and also from the Datastax team as well, which was great. Now, I want to share the notes, and we'll make these links available for everyone afterwards. So first of all, as I said, just mention serverless for everyone else. It actually has a brand new version that's out this week. And this has details on how to add authentication to various services. And you take your functions, your OpenFaaS, and then you can add in managed services. Perhaps you could even add Cassandra if you can find a good Docker image for it. You can add it to a compose file and get it up and running. So excited to be able to share that with everyone. We then have FASD that I just mentioned has a brand new version. And this one has multiple namespace support. So just like the Kubernetes version of OpenFaaS, FASD now can support multiple namespaces for functions, easier to organize them. And very important is this service discovery that wasn't available before. So in Kubernetes, if you ran a local Cassandra in your function, the connection URL would just say something like Cassandra and the port. You can now do that in FASD as well. So there's a couple of really exciting additions there that I'm looking forward to getting some feedback on. Now, there's a GitHub repo that is also available, and this is for all of the code examples that we're showing today. There's 2 of them. The first one will use a native Cassandra driver and the Astra DB managed service. The second one is going to use the document SDK. What's the document SDK, Stefano?
Well, the document SDK for Astra DB is a really cool layer on top of the Astra DB itself, which is part of the broader Stargate layer, which is a data API on top of Astra DB, and it is able to offer several different ways to access the database. So there is a single one underlying database, which is built on Apache Cassandra, and this is what Astra DB offers. And it is a Cassandra database, broadly speaking. But on top of it, there is this Stargate layer that is provides a multiple interface to the same database, making it possible to access the underlying database as if it were a document database, for example.
A bit like Mongo. I mean, this looks like what I would write in a MongoDB.
Yeah, actually, this has been modeled after the major document databases in its interface. Okay. So you get the ease of use of a schemaless, basically, document database, but backed by the famous robustness of the underlying Cassandra, which is
that's interesting.
Combination. Yeah,
because I think within the community, the cloud native community, I don't often hear about people running their own Cassandra. I think this is something that one of sort of the higher reps at Datastax was telling me, Peter, about very large companies running Cassandra. We tend to see the indie hackers and everybody knows Postgres and one thing and another, but what kind of people need Cassandra?
Well, that's a multi-form kind of people. Traditionally, Cassandra has been the large database for reliable and large-scale OLTP workloads, especially when it comes to having. Sorry?
Did you say OLDB?
OLTP mostly, yeah.
What does that stand for?
That is online transaction processing. That's the kind of workload where you have where you need very many transactions per second, and you have them. You want them to be almost real time, and they are not necessarily very complex. So the opposite end of the spectrum would be OLAP, where think of a Spark job running every night. So you have very complex analytics with no requirement of real time.
Yeah.
So Cassandra shines when it comes to OLTP. So it can support tens of thousands of transactions per second per node. And it can basically scale indefinitely in the number of nodes. So that's the database of choice for many.
So it can scale indefinitely,
so to speak. So we have heard of clusters with hundreds of thousands of nodes forming a single database spread all over the world, for example. So
that's
hundreds of petabytes. Yeah, that's very big.
It's gigantic. I mean, is it useful for data warehousing as well? I mean, I'm trying to think of the kind of use cases of such a big database.
Yeah, well, it can work as a storage system for data warehousing. It's not. Cassandra is a particular design that basically does not allow for joins, because joins do not scale well when you have so many nodes forming your distributed system. Yeah. So it is more used as the data storage. But you can plug an analytics workload, data warehouse proper workload on top of it, and then again you have a powerful combination. So it's very usual to have Spark running on top of Cassandra. Actually, they pair very well.
Okay.
So, but the move to offering document API and other, say, easier interfaces is also aimed at making Cassandra known to other kind of developers, because Cassandra is powerful.
In that sense, you're not actually having to deal with or see Cassandra on a daily basis, are you? You're really just looking at it through that interface. The other two bits that I thought were interesting, what Astra adds through its Stargate, effectively like an API gateway for data, isn't it? It adds a GraphQL interface, extremely trendy. GitHub have their V4 API that of their REST API that's now all GraphQL only, which at times can actually be a bit frustrating when you just want to do something quick.
And it takes some time to get used to it, to learn to use it.
And then also there's REST API, isn't there? So you have REST, Document DB, traditional Cassandra, and GraphQL.
Exactly.
And we got some news today from your team here out on InfoWorld, and in every few places saw that pop up on my news feed.
Yeah, that's our big news of this week.
Okay.
So Astra DB, which is a database as a service built on top of Cassandra, goes multi-region. So you can get finally the same advantages as a traditional Cassandra distributed across various data centers, all in the cloud. So you have availability, fault tolerance. You can have a whole data center go down because of your provider might have some trouble, some very big trouble sometimes, which happens.
Yeah.
And still you have all of the advantages of this multi-region. There is also optimized usage of network, so costs are kept into check.
Okay.
And all of this without having to worry about operations. So this is all done for you as a service.
I briefly opened up the UI for Astra, and the first time I came here, I was pleased to see the word free. And then there's some credits as well. So not only do you get some free allowance, but there's also some credit behind that as well, isn't there?
Well, yeah. So you can anyone can register for an Astra DB and start building their instances, so their databases, and build their application on it. And this is free up to a very generous level. So there is a free tier that covers, well, you get $25 credit per month for free, which is more than enough to experiment. Actually, it's even good enough to sustain a small-scale business.
Think some of our friends that are watching might be thinking of a Kubernetes cluster, what that would cost them, and it might be DigitalOcean, $70, $80, $120 a month. So what does $25 correspond to here? Is it like 10 reads and writes, 10 million?
Yeah, that is 40 gigs of storage, 30 million reads, and 5 million writes per month for free. Well, they can be interchanged, but that's more or less the order of magnitude.
I don't think I could use that with my side project. So that would be kind of cool. And then when I added my database, actually was a bit confused to begin with, because it tells me about AWS, GCP, pick a region, but this is actually going into the Datastax AWS account. It's not going into mine, is it?
Yeah, that is also cool, because we don't like to lock anybody in. Basically, that's a bit of our philosophy. So yes, we are offering a service as a cloud, so a database as a service. But we give you, you're showing the right screen. When you create your database, we give you the freedom of choosing your cloud provider. I mean, your cloud provider, because it's your choice, but it's on our accounts and we manage it for you. So you choose your cloud provider because you might have preferences. You choose your region, but then it's all on us. Yeah.
So the thing is, if I think of other providers, I don't know, like Avon, I was doing some integration for them, and if I kept on running the Kafka database, it was going to start costing me $250, $500 a month just for testing. So the refreshing thing about this is I can set it up and I can just leave a side project on it. I don't have to worry that I'm going to get charged $500 or something like that.
Yeah, so there are no surprise bills.
So I think it's very practical from that point of view. Yeah. And as you can see, I created this database earlier. I've got key spaces here. How do key spaces correspond to what people might be more familiar with?
Yeah, so if you think of a relational database, you would see databases or schemas. Yeah. Now, in Astra DB, as well as Cassandra, we use the word key spaces, which is just a logical grouping of tables. So you might want to keep your several application, each one confined to one key space, usually, just for tidiness. And that's more or less it. Yeah.
So I believe it's this table. This key space has my cycling table, and then maybe it's my other one.
Yes. So I think, well, I think what this error is telling you, by the way, you're doing a nice job of showing the SQL console, which is embedded into the UI and allows you to interact as if it were a local Cassandra. Yeah, that's very useful.
Once I tried Datastax, I tweeted about this earlier in the week. I then started trying other managed services that I hadn't been interested in the past, just because I was amazed how simple this kind of thing can be made. And I was thinking, could we do the same for OpenFaaS and give you an OpenFaaS console, one thing or another? It got me really excited. but the console is very fast. It's almost like a terminal, and not every managed service has that. So I was glad to see that. And then we have our connection strings for all the different languages. So it's not just Node.js, but that's what we're using today. So super useful.
Yeah, so there are very, very many ways to connect and interact with Astra DB, as you just said. Yeah, that's great.
So the last item that I had, and then we'll get into the blog post and the sort of walkthrough of what I've been doing with Astra and Datastax, is put this together this morning, deploying OpenFaaS to Linode with Ketchup. And there's sort of a funny story as to why I wrote this, isn't there?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, there's a bit of a funny story as to why I went ahead and wrote this this morning just before the stream.
Yeah, by the way, you are super fast at typing. This is something that is astonishing because you made a blog post in a breeze. But
you would be surprised how many times I've written about installing OpenFaaS. So it's kind of like muscle memory for me now.
Yeah, maybe I can imagine. But so it so went that this morning both of us found out that our ISPs was playing trick on us. So I was having trouble, and still my ISP is doing some tricks when I use higher number ports. So I have to switch to my tethering with my phone. And Alex, you told me this morning, oh, I might have some trouble with my ISP as well. So we briefly thought of quickly setting up a Linode box with OpenFaaS just to make sure we would be able to run this demo. And well, next thing I know is I went to have a quick lunch, and next thing I knew was there was this blog post. So yeah, congratulations.
What can I say? It is very easy to install OpenFaaS on a cloud. If there's no Kubernetes service there already, or you want to keep your costs down, lower, like you were saying earlier, K3S can be a great option. We have Ketchup, which will install Kubernetes over SSH. Arcade is like a little marketplace. It's open source. That will install OpenFaaS. And then if you add Cert Manager, we'll generate an ingress record for you. And before you know it, you've got OpenFaaS with HTTPS, the whole works. So just wanted to touch on that briefly, because in our blog post, we sort of start you off where you've already got OpenFaaS. And that's actually where I am on my computer today as well, as I've already got it on there, running it on Kind. And I guess we should just briefly mention Cassandra, or Cassandra. Cassandra is effectively, where I see it, is Datastax's own Helm chart, which is apparently, according to the Kubernetes podcast, it's going to become an operator. But it's the open source way of running not just Cassandra, but a whole bunch of extra add-ons. One for reaping data, one for scaling, and one for providing that GraphQL API and all the rest of it. So if you're not quite ready to launch yourself into Astra DB, the same sort of experience with Cassandra, but not managed. We've got a bit of a summary about what Astra DB adds on top. And I was just wondering, if I deploy a VM on an EC2 instance onto AWS, that's definitely going to cost you guys some money, isn't it? How do you afford to give that away for free like that?
Well, that's on us, because it's our business model to try and we believe in enlarging the community.
The answer that Peter from Datastax mentioned to me was because it's serverless, and that was the reason why we all got in touch in the beginning. Is that he said, well, yes, we'll launch the VM for you, but we'll wind it down when it's not being used, and then bring it back again. And that, is basically the whole idea of OpenFaaS and functions. And so not only are you lowering my costs and allowing me to have all that free tier, but you're lowering the cost for customers and for yourselves. So it's not just you taking on that cost. It's actually got some pretty cool technology in it, storing off parts of that data so that you can bring it back to life again when I access it. For all I know, my database might be scaled down right now. So we show people how to run and build out their database. Right. And as you say, you had these 30 million reads, 4.5 million writes, 40 gigs of storage. I doubt I could use that with my side projects.
It's hard.
And this was my first try. And this was actually quite a long time ago. This is probably in, I don't know, June. And I was sat in a cafe, had my coffee there, and I was just playing around, and it didn't take me very long at all. I took the hello world from the docs. I took an OpenFaaS function, and I just sort of overlaid it, right? And the OpenFaaS functions, as we know, are created through the FaaS CLI, and you'll basically get a handler like this, module.exports. You have an event and a context. The event has everything on it, like the body. It's going to have the headers, etc. And then the context will also allow you to set headers to go back to the client. Like, yep, found that record, great. No, I didn't find it. You can also send back some JSON if you want to, or some binary through the .succeed or fail method. And this is async await compatible. It wasn't always, but it has been for quite a while now. So you actually ran through this, didn't you? And you got this up and running.
Yeah, I got it up and running. And I have to say, it's very easy to go along with it. So as you said, you just type a command and you get a skeleton for the future function. So for the function you're going to write, you just have to put the non-trivial code, the boilerplate, the little boilerplate that is there is ready for you. So it's very easy. You don't even notice, and you have deployed an OpenFaaS function there.
In fact, if I share
so it's cool. Yeah.
If I share the rest of the screen and just put this down, I could show you very quickly a temporary directory, and I run FaaS CLI new language node 14, so the current LTS version, and put a name there, or I don't know, DB reader. And what happens with these functions is they make Docker images, container images that go into your registry. So that's why we have that prefix. When we then look at the YAML file that gets generated with this, we can put secrets here, we can put labels for filtering them, environment variables.
Yeah. Cool.
Now, the secrets get mounted as files, whereas if you're used to using a PaaS like Heroku, they're going to be created as environment variables, or Google Cloud's Cloud Run, they use envars as well, Fly.io. These are all other serverless platforms that you could run very similar code on. And then there is your handler that you'll get. And as I mentioned, it's async. What that means is that you can actually, instead of having to use lots of callbacks or promises, you can just have an await. And if you had some sort of database, you could obviously do something like that. And we'll see some very similar syntax to this in a few moments. That's just an example. And then once you've got your YAML file, that defines the Docker image. This could be on GHCR, this could be on GCR, could be on ECR. There's so many registries out there. It could even be on your self-hosted registry, but it has to be on one. And then the version tag, it is always good to sort of specify a version, and as you make a change, you can increase it and one thing and another. And then to build these, it's just a case of FaaS CLI build and YAML file. That was very quick, but if you didn't, if you had a fresh computer, you would download the Node.js base image. It will run an npm install. It will do the whole works. It runs unit tests for you if you've got them, and then you can effectively run that. So let's come back up a level.
So it's a Docker build and Docker push packed together and wrapped together. You don't even have to worry about it.
And then the last bit is a deploy, and that's the one that goes over the OpenFaaS connection.
Yeah.
So the blog post that we had, I was thinking, well, what could I write that would just be quite simple? And I think the cyclists are actually in your documentation.
That's a very well-known example of interacting through CQL. So CQL is the language you interact with Cassandra.
If anybody gets my weekly newsletters, you'll know I'm really into cycling as well. So it seemed like a no-brainer for me.
A fitting example.
Fitting example. It's a better way of putting it. And then when was it in? So I've got the 2 key spaces. What was my other one?
Use cycling. No, cycling. I think it's the key space, if I remember.
Cyclists, I think.
You have path completion anyway. You can try just cycle, and that
makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
I can tab to complete, select stuff.
Yeah, I have almost everything that can be path completed will be. Cyclist name, that is the name of the table, and there you go.
Oh, and this is just very, very similar to what I would type in Postgres on MySQL.
Yeah.
And we just inserting.
So CQL was modeled around SQL. Now it has some obvious differences due to the underlying different architectures, but it is made not to intimidate relational users, developers. Yeah.
And now with the Astra DB, you have the document DB. So again, not to intimidate more modern developers. And now you've got GraphQL and REST. So there's something for everyone.
Yeah.
So these records are in a very defined schema. You know, I've been able to select on them. I can update the individual records. I do actually have the function already set up on my local computer, but I've not deployed it. So what I was going to do, if we look at my so arcade install OpenFaaS. It's the fastest possible way. This will use Helm, and it just passes in all the arguments to Helm. And there you see it in action. Probably take a couple of moments to actually come up, which arcade will print out what you need to type in. It's a pretty useful command. Have you used this one before, rollout status?
Not yet.
It's one of my favorites now, because if you're trying to automate Kubernetes, you never know if a pod is ready. So being able to run that.
I see. So this stays waiting for what is needed to get ready.
Yeah.
Cool. And I've seen it used this morning when I tried to install K3S. I'm actually I saw it running, and actually I saw this behavior you described. Yes.
Now the port forward, is that one that you've used before?
Yeah.
Have you used the port forwarding before?
Yeah, I use that.
So the reason that I use port forwarding or like to use port forwarding is because you have node ports, you've got load balancers, you've got cluster IPs, and goodness knows what else, ingress. Not all of them work on every cloud and distribution. Port forwarding just always works all the time. It's the lowest common denominator. So now what's happening is that pod is being forwarded to my machine. FaaS CLI list just worked for me. If I do a deployment of the cycling, it's going to fail because I don't have the secrets yet. And so that's what I just had selected, is my files are on disk, and I'm going to create them. The ones that are text are going to be trimmed, and the secure connect bundle is a bunch of certificates and other keys and things like that. That's not going to be trimmed because that's going to be a binary upload.
Actually, it's a zip file containing certificates. Yeah. And I remember this funny story that to make this example work, you noticed that binaries were needed to be a bit handled in a novel. So you had to extend OpenFaaS secret handling.
Yes, that's true. I don't know how we didn't come across it before, or I mean, if you created your secret with kubectl, it would be fine. And so we just did that to begin with, but then I wanted FaaS CLI secret create to work in exactly the same way for binary files as text. And so we did an enhancement. So just by doing this work together, it actually really helped OpenFaaS to support this kind of use case. So there we are. Every time I hit curl, I'm seeing those same records that were on the CQL just here, even match the IDs line by line. And if I were to insert another bit of data, it would just appear here. So the way this works is through the Cassandra driver. Cassandra driver is like that more traditional portable. You can use it with Cassandra. You can use it with any kind of Cassandra. We've got a very sort of rudimentary select statement here. there's a log statement, and then we close the connection, return the rows. I want to get rid of that.
Obviously, there is much more to the Cassandra driver than you can show in 3 lines. So it has sophisticated features, and it's in almost all common languages. You can have async connection pooling. It handles reconnection. It handles automatic selection of the target nodes to query. It has a few nice features.
The connection pooling is an interesting one because it's often asked by OpenFaaS users with traditional databases. And what you can do is if you put your database here outside of the handler and initialize a database pool here, then that will live on. And so that particular instance of that function, let's say we're starting off with 1, that will get a connection, and then new requests that come in will be very fast because they'll be able to reuse the pool. Whereas what I have here is just open, close on every request, which obviously, as you can see, it's slightly more latency.
Places a bit of a strain on the latency, clearly.
Yeah. Now, we'll be able to compare that with the other one, the weekly newsletter. Now this, as you can see, similar code, but now we're importing Astra JS collections from NPM. We're still reading the OpenFaaS secrets from disk. If you want to know more about and be comfortable with OpenFaaS and building functions in Node, remember there's the ebook available. And then we're going off and getting the links collection, performing a create on it, if it's a post, and then if it was had a URL in the query string, we want the actual link that I'd submitted for the newsletter. It does a find, returns it, but we found that found a little nuance here as well that we've had to work around. So let's go back to the blog post. Here. So we've entered in the code for this. NPM modules are installed using npm save. So we do have a package JSON. We did our FaaS CLI up. We called the function. We used JQ to make it look a bit prettier. And as you say, there are other things that you can do. Like you can batch as well using that native driver. And so here's what you would do if you wanted to batch a series of commands or queries, which I think is, again, just shows what kind of use cases this is made for.
So, sorry, I've seen in the YouTube that someone is asking for the resolution of this stream to be raised a bit because apparently it's a bit hard to read the code.
Okay.
And sure enough,
I've just zoomed
sorry
in a
for
little
interrupting,
bit.
but
no, it's okay.
I'm not. Oh, okay. No, I think it's just a matter of. Yeah, I actually can see it at high resolution, 720p.
Yeah.
But still,
we should have 1080p after the recording is up.
Yes,
all of the code examples for anybody that's watching are available on GitHub, so don't worry.
Yeah, so that should be.
This is the usual resolution for the streams, but all of these links are available. I will also take a link to this document and make that available too. I just can't look at the comments right now while I'm sharing.
Yeah, exactly. So sorry for me to interrupt, but
that's okay. You can interrupt. Have we got any other comments or questions?
Peter is having fun of my ISP, but that was time ago. Yeah, no, nothing else. All clear.
Okay. Well, if you're tuned in and you're listening, let us know what your questions are. We'll have a bit of time to come back to them soon.
Yeah.
Now, Stargate API. This reminds me of the TV program.
Yeah,
that's all I can think of.
Yeah.
We've got this collections library.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, as you and I sort of talked about, was there are some basic examples here, but if any of the team are listening or watching this later on, it would be great to have a few more examples on how to handle sort of more complicated scenarios, or maybe some error handling, or if you've got a 404. And we did a lookup for a record. And the way Astra DB works with its Stargate, document DB, etc., is you get a table created for you. So rather than having that very succinct, almost prescriptive SQL-like schema, what you actually end up with is a something very different. It's completely generated. It's inferred. I think perhaps even dynamic. Am I right in understanding this can change as well?
What happens is that your document, which has an arbitrary schema, arbitrary structure, your JSON document is shredded into as many rows. So in the underlying table, as you see, you have many rows. And depending on the nesting level and the data type of the JSON item, of the particular value in the JSON tree, it will end up having different values for the very many columns you are seeing.
So that's what I have, isn't it? On the top left, sample.json.
Yeah.
The time added, the note, whether I've sent that in an email yet in the URL.
Yeah.
And we can see that.
Each one becomes a row in the table. Yeah. And they are grouped in the same partition, which is a Cassandra concept. So they might be retrieved all at once to reconstruct your document. Obviously, all of these, you don't even have to notice that, but yeah.
And there's lots of columns as well. P0 through 44.
Yeah, that is to allow for up to 45 level of nesting, basically. Because the document shredding is a deterministic two-way protocol, say, to translate any JSON into this structure. And with the help of specific indices built on this table, that allows to look for documents searching for any field in the JSON. So you can do arbitrary where clauses, which is something that Cassandra itself would not allow in general. Yeah.
I do actually see Furkan is here from Trenadol in Turkey. David, I believe from France, if I'm remembering right. And we've got a few other of our regular community here. Thanks for tuning in. Let us know where you're here from. Where are you in the world? What company? Have you used OpenFaaS before? Do you think you'll give Astra a shot? Let us know. Okay, so let's continue. What would this look like? Well, I wanted to show people what it might look like if we did it the old way, right? And so I would type in use functions to get into that key space. Then I've got create table links. I've got a UID, a text field, data boolean, another text field, and that's just like what we had in the first example with Cassandra driver, right?
Yeah. So there are various use cases for the more schema-full or schemaless choices, of course. Probably in this case, since let's say it's a service to collect links and issue them as newsletter items. So I can easily imagine that being run by, let's say this service just started, and then month after month, new ideas come out, and we want to add a flag. Maybe, as you write in the blog post, we want to add a flag such as send or some other qualifiers that allow to better match items.
What about
to recipients.
Approved, for instance?
So
we get multiple people in the team. Now I want to make sure that a link's approved before it goes through. You could say, is it sponsored?
Exactly.
And that could result in different output in the markdown. So
that's probably a good case in which free-form schemaless interface would be great, because I love Cassandra, vanilla Cassandra. I like it, but if there is one thing that is hard to do in Cassandra is to reinvent the data model after your application is running, because then you have to deal with migration from table to table. Maybe you have to maintain zero downtime, and it's always. At the sole mention of the word migration, many people faint.
Yeah, it's very tricky at times. We used to run migrations at ADP for customer data, have to do it out of hours, test it, staging databases. That's one of the sort of promises of your document database, isn't it? Is that you don't have to think about it as much or at all?
Not particularly, as far as I know.
So you've got Alistair saying hi, Papacy, and fan. So this is what we wanted to show you today. I think we've got through the bulk of what we had here. Let's deploy this function then. And what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to probably delete the table first. And do feel free to correct my terminology if I'm speaking.
Okay.
So we need to use function to get into the functions key space. And then, as you said, I can use my completion.
So you have
anything I want here.
Links. So, no, wait. Yeah, that is links.
Links.
Yeah, that is the underlying table backing your document interface.
So I assume that I can just drop this.
Yeah, you can write drop table links, and that should work.
And then what we're going to do is effectively cleaning the slate.
Yeah.
It's gone. That's great.
Because
now
exist. Great.
We can go back to the code and walk it back in. So we've got our handler. And this is what I meant earlier, is that when you think about your functions, they could be running on an edge device, an industrial door lock in your office. Maybe they're monitoring your plants. Maybe they're actually processing customer transactions all around the world. Whatever they're doing, there's the API of Astra DB, and then there's the API of the function. What we found is that if we hadn't got a record created, that this error that I just showed you in the console doesn't exist. That was effectively what the function was getting, a 404.
Yeah.
Then the user was getting a 404 when they were calling the links API, and we didn't want that. So the design for the function was at any time, whether there's a record or not, if you list the records, always want an empty set if there's nothing in there or it doesn't exist. So this is what we did here. And this is where, as I say, Peter or any of the team, if you're listening, it'd be great to have a few more examples like this. You can use ours if you like in the documentation. So this allows us to get a 404, handle it, and then give back an empty set of links.
I have a good news on this for you, because we spoke, you and I spoke a bit about this point recently.
Yeah.
And that sparked a very interesting internal discussion on that. And the point is that this kind of behavior was by design. So not creating the table unless you do an insertion was by design to mimic the general behavior of other document databases. And also the same thing goes for swallowing the error, apparently. So I didn't do the research myself, but I think that was made to mimic the behavior of other document databases. But still, now the discussion is open to make this into a flag. So whenever you instantiate your SDK item to connect with the document API, I think we will start a small tweaking of the SDK so that you decide whether to have the error swallowed or just propagate it down to your application layer. So that would be
interesting.
And I thank you for this contribution, because
it's all part of the service, whether obviously this Datastax is a client of OpenFaaS Limited. That's why we're kind of putting this on, but I'm also finding it extremely interesting. When I give you the kind of expert feedback from a developer's perspective. A couple of weeks ago, we had a live stream with Mark Coleman, really well renowned for his developer marketing. And the reason why me and you and other people can give great developer feedback is because we're developers. So we use it. We can give you insights that you might not have thought of. So I want to deploy this now. And we've got another error. Now, this time it's saying Astra token. So I thought I had everything I needed. In my first example, I had a client ID, secret, secure bundle. Now I need another token.
Yeah.
This is for the Astra API, effectively for Stargate, isn't it? Whereas the other bits were just for plain old Cassandra.
Exactly. So it's like completely different ways of connecting. One is based on this secure bundle that is an exchange of certificates. And the other is ID secret token triple. That's
some instructions then, and I believe we're told here to go create the token in the UI.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with the RBAC for that. I mean, you could define your own role. You could pick from about 20 different types of roles. I did get the wrong one to start with. I think I put read-write API service account.
Read-write service account should work.
That didn't work. Yeah, API service account.
Okay, no, right.
That sounded like it should work because I was using the API and it didn't. And I was super confused. Spent about 2 or 3 hours, as you do, knocking your head on the wall. And then I realized there was read-write user. I thought I'd try that. And so if anybody's watching, listening, don't do what I did. Create the right kind of RBAC user. So I'm now going to create my token. And again, I'm trimming it because it's text. And the deployment should work this time around. Well, that was very fast. Behind the scenes, when you deploy a function, in the OpenFaaS offend namespace, you were actually getting pods. And they run HTTP servers. We have our own gateway, a bit like yours, called the OpenFaaS gateway. That's got a UI built into it, its own REST API. When you call that, that calls the function. If there's no functions, it creates one and scales it up. If you call it many, many times, it will scale the function up and add more replicas, more pods. And just like you talked about Cassandra being able to replicate itself, in a similar way, OpenFaaS will spread out those throughout your cluster. And we can now curl this, and we've got that empty set. At the same time, I'm still getting the error of a 404, which is exactly what I wanted from my API. So,
exactly. Successful error handling.
Next thing would be for me to go ahead and insert some data. So I had an example here. And I was importing sample.json. So I can hear YouTube in the background. I'm going to mute it because I think it's coming out of one of my speakers.
I see a comment in the chat. Kyle also chimes in to say that he's also returning an empty list on no match, so no error percolated to the user, which makes for a better user experience. Yeah, I can definitely see many use cases where this is just what everybody would expect. So
and was that Kyle?
Yeah.
What are you using, Kyle? Are you using Astra? Are you using something else? And we've also got more with us joining us from Senegal, and Mate Sekus. I hope I'm saying your name right. Thank you for being here. PHP expert has been contributing to the OpenFaaS PHP support. So we had this sample JSON. That is the right one. I was just checking that wasn't a cyclist. And now I'm going to do a curl as a post. And what you can see is I put a content type of application JSON. So the function understands it's a JSON coming in. Data binary has loaded the particular file in. And then I've been given an ID back of that document, of that record. So we curl for a regular get. And maybe let's pipe it to JQ again. This time we don't want a post, we want to get. We've got our link.
There we go.
Now, there is a link for Astra on here. Maybe we should insert that as well.
Yeah.
I can just edit this record. It's one of those links to help people help us track.
Get your own Astra DB instance.
Free Astra DB trial. And let's
there's an answer by Kyle. He's using Postgres in AWS. But the philosophy is general, right? So we don't want to have errors go all the way to the user. That's a very bad experience usually.
So now we've got another ID, and we're doing a second call back to the API. I think I am just giving you these documents back with their IDs, but we could make this look more attractive as an object. I think if I just find where we are. we're literally returning the objects one for one. So I guess part of the idea of a document database is you can have the schema as you would have it. Postgres does have a JSON sort of column, but you're not necessarily having to spend a lot of time morphing some JSON object into rows and then back from rows to JSON again. You could deliver this to the user, or you could sort of pretty it up a bit, I imagine, and sort of make it so that it's ID as a field instead of as a name here in a map.
Yeah, so maybe you want to have your own order, your own sorting at the function level, because your front end doesn't want to get involved with that.
That's a perfect use case. And with the data as we've got it now, we can't do that because this is a map, and maps are sort of non-deterministic on their keys. So we could build that. So where we have the links, we would effectively have our sorted links, and then we would do some sort of closure to filter or map from what we had. We'd then return that instead. And as you say, it's not really a tool that you would use for relations and joins. It's designed for potentially very big, flat structures. But let's say we wanted some of that. I could look up my links here. I could then look up a staff member separately. I could join them in memory if I wanted to, and then return a richer object to the UI.
Yeah, so this is spot on, because this is how you would, one of the ways you would handle such relations when using Cassandra in general. Either you denormalize the table, or if you think the workload is okay, you are prepared to handle joins in your code, basically.
So this is all it takes. If you're listening and you use OpenFaaS, or you're actually from the Datastax community, simple virtual machine on Linode or another cloud like AWS, install Kubernetes with K3s with Ketchup, or install it with the FASD that we mentioned earlier. That's just a single node version of OpenFaaS, perfectly good for production. There was a comment that Stefano that you made that you can even run OpenFaaS on Raspberry Pis. All of the code we have here will work there. I'm not sure that Cassandra would work on a Raspberry Pi, but certainly all of OpenFaaS and our functions will do. And then you can have the database on the cloud and use this user credit that's available to you.
Yeah. Well, I think Cassandra would need at least, I think 8 gigs of RAM. So that's probably a bit too demanding, because not much because of the Cassandra in it, but all of the tooling, Grafana, and there are a few heavy things, because Cassandra comes with a whole set of tools on it, which take some resources. So
yeah.
But
I think you're right. So if I was running something like this at home, I think having a managed database would be great. Just run my functions on my Raspberry Pi on an Intel NUC, have the database offloaded. It's, as I say, I think it's going to take a long time for me to use those 30 million reads up, even if it's a popular website, and that's every month.
Yeah, well, I do stuff with Astra all the time. We run workshops, we do demo, we test products, we do development, everything, and I never chipped more than I never consumed more than 2 or 3 of the $25 per month, definitely. So that's really not a concern unless you are running a very large business.
Yeah. So we do have all of the code on GitHub in this repository. This was put together more recently. So if you've seen the blog post, we went back and updated the blog post, added this in. You've got the 2 examples we've just been showing you here. The idea isn't to give you full working production application, but to give you a starting point. So your cycling example, great for Cassandra driver, weekly newsletter, great for the document DB. Perhaps you want to create your own GraphQL example. It shouldn't be much harder for you now that you've seen the basic examples. And we have got additional links, how to get started with Astra itself, more on Stargate. The document DB library, and hopefully we'll get some of those examples in, like the code that we've written here with the 404 detection. I mean, it seems like quite a basic use case. And then there's been sort of 3 much, I think, longer live streams in the past that your team has put together where you've actually tried to build an application from scratch.
Yeah, those are usually 2 hours workshop that go into a bit more detail and try to be hands-on, follow-along kind of thing. So that might be very great to learn. Yeah,
those are available on YouTube. Those are free to view.
Yeah.
The TikTok clone sounds interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. That was done in partnership with Anya Kubov, who is developer, a full stack developer influencer, so to speak. And she's very great. She made this TikTok clone, the front end part, and then we worked together to hook it to the underlying Astra, and a cool product came out that was later made into
seeing something that looks almost exactly like the OpenFaaS code we just wrote. You see a handler, async function event.
There's a strong reason to that, if I may say, because when we run our workshops in Gitpod, but that's not the end of the story. That's just for them to be easily done live during the live by everyone. But the final goal usually is to deploy on Netlify. And Netlify offers functions, serverless function service. So the code itself is already structured with front end and functions. And actually, it would be a matter of changing a few lines and changing the way secrets are injected to have it working with in OpenFaaS or with FASD or whatever.
Yeah, I absolutely
it's already
think
that
so.
kind of structure. And I think there is a huge pool of use cases for that, because not everyone wants to maintain and write their own API, which maybe does just a thin layer, a boilerplate layer between the data fetching and the application, just for the sake of having to write the API. So serverless functions, especially when they can be scaled down without relying on a single, for some reason, I don't want to use Netlify because I have some regulation requirements. I have to run it on-prem. So that would be a great case for OpenFaaS.
That's definitely one reason why our users tend to like OpenFaaS is maybe they can't run somewhere. The other one is to have that agnostic ability. Or
definitely,
let's say they actually do really love AWS. I think of a company like Form3 that's got really they could probably write OpenFaaS themselves, or would probably even want to. They're that kind of company. They love sort of building everything from scratch. They use AWS. They have EKS deployed there. It might even be easier for them just to deploy on OpenFaaS because they're already using Kubernetes on the cloud, and then use a managed provider. Sometimes because of memory limits, timeouts, region availability of managed services. But also, you bring up a good point with Netlify. It is very convenient. There's not much arguing with that. And so definitely very similar to OpenFaaS. So is AWS Lambda. But I think Netlify is probably one of the easier ones to get started with. OpenFaaS as well. And the FASD version means that if you're, concerned about costs, can make that really easy for you too. So great. Okay. Perhaps something to look at in the future then.
Yeah. Well, I'm usually more in favor of portable solutions as a general standpoint. So that's absolutely.
Yeah, definitely well aligned there.
Yeah. Somebody's chiming in on this point. So I think there's some sensitivity to this issue of portability.
But I wouldn't be that surprised if we've got any of the OpenFaaS community here. It's definitely something that we really care about.
Yeah.
Now let's get back to where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're getting some standing ovations from your team. Nice to see. So, what questions do people have for us whilst we're here? You've got Stefano from Datastax. You can ask him anything about Astra DB. You can ask me something about OpenFaaS if you'd like to. And if you can't think of anything, maybe just go and start the repo, read the blog post, share it with a colleague, see if that's something that you can use next time you want a side project.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you have questions about Astra or Cassandra, please reach us out. You can find us on
Very
Discord,
easy to find,
on our
I imagine.
YouTube channel. Yeah. So
okay.
we have a lively community on Discord about Cassandra, and not only that. So please, you're welcome. Can I drop the link to it if I find it?
Yeah, if you put that into the chat.
Okay, great. So that might.
We can also put it into the. If you put it into the show notes as well, the Google Doc.
Yes,
I'm going to put that onto our video link. So anybody that's watching now or watching later, you'll be able to click at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to do it just after we finish, and you'll get the link to the Google Doc with all those links in it. All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour, and we managed to hit everything we wanted to do, which I'm very pleased about. Both of our internets survived, and I didn't have to tether. I was terrified that Virgin Media was going to cut the connection or something.
Everything worked.
Yeah.
So next task is to go complain about at our ISPs for next time. So
Mate is saying perhaps we can extend the GrowLab project with some sensors. GrowLab, I don't know if anybody's seen that. How useful is...
I think Mate is very spot on, because sensor IoT is one of the very typical workloads for Cassandra, because it's time series based basically, and it's a lot of writes and some reads, and that's the very much fitting use case for Cassandra. It can work with enormous traffic in that way if properly configured. Yeah.
I just for some reason I didn't think of it as a time series, but do you have extra libraries that you use for that, or just
you can configure the internal mechanisms of Cassandra in a way that is particularly suited to workloads where all time ordered writes arrive. So you seldom have to go back and overwrite previous data. So you can tune that's a bit technical. You can tune compaction strategy within the table to take full advantage of this kind of a write pattern. Yeah.
Great. I mean, that would be interesting, Peter, if you kind of thinking of next things to try out. GrowLab, I've been sending sensor readings from my shed, from my garden. I've got one up here in my office. And during the heat wave, it didn't really help much. It was still far too hot, but at least I could see a pretty graph showing me that. And as Peter says, if you want to contact me, I am pretty responsive on Twitter most of the time. I'll be able to probably connect you to the right person. Great. Okay. Well, I think we'll thank everybody for coming. Stefano, you did a great job preparing for this. I was really impressed, and great feedback. And hopefully, you'll be around in the OpenFaaS community again.
Absolutely. And, I'll be around in touch. And thank you for inviting me here.
You're welcome. All right. Well, good evening or good morning, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. And next week, we'll be here talking about Raspberry Pi, actually designing them. So server boards. I'm going to have Ivan from JetBrains here. He's going to show us his process for designing a new board to run as a server. And we'll be able to run OpenFaaS on it as well. So it'll be quite interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Good. So Stefano, we'll stay on, and now we'll play the outro. All right. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.